She took shelter in his barn during the storm. Then she asked if humans could romance like her people. The storm came suddenly, like it had been hiding behind the clouds all day, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The sky turned a dark gray that seemed almost black, and the wind began to howl through the trees surrounding the small town. Leaves flew through the air like they had a life of their own, and the rain started pounding down in heavy sheets. It was the kind of storm that made everything feel smaller, like the world had shrunk to the size of a single barn on the edge of the woods. John had been working late in his fields that evening, trying to finish fixing a broken fence before the rain hit. He didn't usually mind storms, but this one was different. It felt alive, angry, and impatient. The last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the clouds, leaving a dim, cold light that made it hard to see the animals moving in their pens. He hurried across the muddy ground, trying to secure the doors of the barn. When he thought he saw movement near the tree line at first, he convinced himself it was just a tree branch swaying in the wind, or maybe a stray animal looking for shelter. But then he saw it again, a small figure moving cautiously through the rain, hunched over as though the wind itself might knock it down. His heart skipped a beat. This part of the woods was empty at this hour, and strangers didn't usually walk through the storm, not in the middle of the night. John's instincts told him to call out, but the words got stuck in his throat. The figure paused and looked toward him, standing still for a long moment. That's when he noticed something strange. The figure was a woman, drenched from head to toe, her clothes clinging to her small frame. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, but there was something unusual about her. Her hair was dark, plastered to her face from the rain, and her eyes, he could see them now, were wide and alert, almost glowing in the dim light. They were unlike any human eyes he had seen, filled with curiosity, caution, and something he could not name. Without thinking too much, John ran toward the barn. "Hey, come here!" he shouted over the roar of the wind. The woman flinched but didn't run. Instead, she took a few careful steps toward him, keeping her body low as though she wanted to stay unnoticed. When she reached the barn, she didn't speak. She just looked at him, shivering, teeth chattering from the cold. John grabbed a heavy blanket from the barn and wrapped it around her shoulders, trying to offer some warmth against the relentless storm. "Are you okay? Where are you from?" he asked gently. There was no fear in his voice, though he felt it rising inside him. He had never seen anyone like her before. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying him with those strange eyes. Then, in a voice that was soft but strangely musical, she said, "I needed shelter." The simplicity of the words struck him. She wasn't asking for money or food. She wasn't even trying to explain why she was out in the storm. She just needed a safe place to wait it out. John nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. "You can stay here until the storm passes. No one else is around tonight, so you'll be safe." She nodded in return, and for a moment they just stood there in the barn, listening to the wind and rain battering the wooden walls. It was quiet except for the storm, but the quiet felt heavy. Filled with tension and questions neither of them dared to ask yet. John's mind raced. Who was she? Why was she out there alone? And why did she feel so different? He couldn't put his finger on it, but there was a subtle energy about her. Something human, yet not entirely human. As though she belonged somewhere else entirely, but had been forced into his world by the storm. He fetched a lantern and lit it, filling the barn with a soft, warm glow. The woman watched the light flicker with fascination, her eyes reflecting it like water. She didn't move to leave or hide. She seemed content to observe, as though she had never seen fire before. John realized he might be wrong about her being just a stranger. There was something wild and careful about her at the same time. She moved with grace, but there was tension in every muscle, as though she was ready to flee if danger appeared. "Do you want some food?" "I have bread and cheese," John asked, trying to make conversation. She shook her head slowly. "No, I just need to wait." The words were hesitant, measured, and he noticed that she had an accent that didn't belong to anyone he had met in this town. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He decided not to press her for answers. For now, it was enough that she was safe. He closed the barn doors to keep the wind out and went back to check on his animals, glancing over his shoulder occasionally. The storm raged on outside, but inside the barn, there was a fragile sense of calm. He thought about how strange it was that a total stranger could make him feel both nervous and responsible at the same time. Hours passed. Or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed distorted in the storm. The woman didn't speak much, but every so often, she would glance at him, studying him, trying to understand something he couldn't name. There was intelligence in her gaze, and John realized that she was not just a frightened girl. She was observing, learning, and perhaps trying to figure out who he was and what he might do as the storm began to lessen. The barn felt almost like a sanctuary. Rain still fell outside, but the wind had calmed and the darkness had lifted slightly. John finally sat down on a hay bale, exhausted from the tension and worry. The woman remained standing near the lantern, her figure outlined in the soft light. There was a silence between them, not awkward, but filled with unspoken understanding. Neither of them wanted to leave this moment too quickly. Then, almost as if testing him, she asked her first real question. "Do humans usually help strangers like this?" Her voice was soft, cautious, but curious. John blinked. The question was simple, but the way she asked it made it feel profound. Like she was trying to understand an entire way of life from one small action. He smiled faintly. "Some do, most. I think most try. But some don't," he said honestly. She nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly as she considered his words. John realized that he had spent most of his life alone, surrounded by fields and animals, rarely speaking to anyone beyond the necessities of daily life. Yet here was someone, a complete stranger, who had forced him into a connection he couldn't ignore. Her presence was demanding his attention, and in a strange way, he was grateful for it. He realized that the storm had brought more than rain and wind. It had brought someone extraordinary into his life, someone who made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. Night slowly began to fade into the earliest hints of dawn. The storm had passed completely now, leaving only the sound of dripping water and distant birds beginning to stir. The woman finally moved closer to him, sitting on a bale of hay across from him. She didn't speak, but her eyes, full of curiosity and something unspoken, watched him as if waiting for him to say something else. Something important. John took a deep breath, realizing that this night would stay with him forever. The woman in his barn was not just a stranger who needed shelter. She was a puzzle, a mystery, a force that challenged everything he thought he knew about the world. And as he watched her quietly, he knew one thing for certain. Life had just become a little stranger, and a lot more interesting. The storm had passed, but something new, something unexplainable, had arrived. And John knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of a story he could never have imagined, a story that would challenge his understanding of humans, of connection, and perhaps even of love itself. Morning came slowly, spreading soft light over the wet fields in the barn where John and the woman had spent the stormy night. The storm had left the world fresh and quiet, with birds singing softly in the distance and puddles reflecting the pale sky. John stood outside for a moment, letting the cool, clean air fill his lungs. His heart was still restless from the events of the night. He thought about the woman he had sheltered. Her strange presence had lingered in his mind like a mystery he couldn't solve. When he returned to the barn, he found her sitting on a hay bale watching him. She hadn't moved during the night, except to shift slightly when the wind rattled the barn walls. Her wet clothes had dried, leaving her hair tousled and her features soft in the early light. She looked different, in daylight less strange, but still carrying an air of otherworldliness. She watched him carefully as he walked over, her large eyes taking in every movement. "Good morning," John said quietly, unsure if he should start a conversation or let the silence linger. She tilted her head and returned the greeting with a soft, musical voice. "Morning." There was something about her tone, calm and deliberate, that made John feel both cautious and curious. It was clear she had thought carefully about her words, as if speaking too quickly might reveal more than she intended. "Are you hungry?" he asked, hoping to keep the conversation casual. "I can make something for you." She shook her head again, her movements slow and deliberate. "No, I do not need food now. I just want to observe." John paused, surprised by the honesty in her words. Most people would have been shy or grateful. But she was different. She wanted to understand, to learn. John decided to respect her wishes. He went about his morning chores, feeding the animals, checking the fences, cleaning the barn while she stayed nearby, watching. Her presence was quiet but noticeable, like a shadow that followed him with curiosity rather than fear. Every so often, she would speak a single word or ask a question about something small, the animals, the tools, or the land. Each question seemed simple, but John noticed she was not asking for practical answers. She wanted to understand why things worked the way they did and what they meant to humans. After a while, she asked, "Do humans always live this way? Surrounded by work and routine?" Her voice was gentle, almost like she was pondering the question herself. John stopped for a moment, leaning on the handle of his shovel. "I think most humans do," he said. "Life is busy, and we often get caught up in our tasks. But there's more to it than just work." She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on him. "More like what?" she asked. John smiled faintly, thinking about how to explain something so simple yet so complicated. Life is also about connection. Friendship, family, trust, and sometimes love. We live with people, share moments, and care for each other. That is what makes life meaningful. She listened carefully, tilting her head as though weighing each word. "Connection," she repeated softly, testing the sound of the word. "Do humans always understand it?" He shook his head, feeling a little sad at the thought. "No, not always. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we hurt each other without meaning to. But most of us try." She nodded again, her eyes thoughtful. There was a pause, long and quiet, as if she was storing these words somewhere deep inside her mind. John felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was the first time in years that he had shared something personal with someone who listened without judgment, without distraction, without rushing him. The day passed slowly, with the woman following him quietly as he worked. She asked about everything: why the animals needed care, why he worked the land, why humans built homes and towns. John answered honestly, though he could see that some of her questions were deeper than they seemed. It was as if she was trying to understand not just the world, but the humans themselves. At one point she pointed to a small stream near the barn and asked, "Why do humans value water so much?" John laughed softly. "Because it gives life. Without it, nothing survives. Humans know that, and we try to respect it, though not always successfully." She nodded seriously. "Respect. Yes. My people respect life differently. We observe, we connect, but we do not always interfere. Humans interfere often." Her words were calm, almost judging. But there was no malice in the observation. John felt a flicker of unease, but also fascination. She was not rude, but her perspective was unlike anything he had encountered. He realized she might be from a group of people who lived quietly in the world, watching and learning, living by rules he could not understand. He remembered the way she moved, careful, graceful, almost animal-like in her precision, but there was intelligence in her eyes, too, and a longing to understand. As the afternoon came, the sunlight broke through the clouds, casting golden beams across the barn. The woman finally spoke about something personal. "Your world. Right. It is loud. It moves fast. But there is something gentle here too, in the barn, in the fields." Her words surprised him. He had never thought of his life as gentle. It was work, routine, struggle. But through her eyes, he realized there was comfort in the simplicity. In the quiet moments of life that often went unnoticed, John nodded slowly. "Yes, sometimes the quiet moments matter more than the loud ones. They are where we think, where we rest, where we notice life." She smiled faintly, a tiny, almost invisible curve of her lips. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it felt like sunlight piercing through the clouds. Later, as he fetched water for the animals, she asked another question that made him pause. "Do humans share feelings easily? Love, friendship, trust?" Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. John leaned against the wooden fence, thinking carefully. Some do. Some find it easy. Others find it hard, maybe because they've been hurt. But it is possible. Humans can feel deeply, and some of us care more than we can ever express. She nodded, staring at the ground for a long moment. My people. We connect differently. We share more than words. Trust comes naturally, love. It is different. John realized he had never thought about love in that way before. Most humans experienced it with words, gestures, and promises. But her people, whoever they were, seemed to experience it as a natural bond, an unspoken understanding. He felt a pang of curiosity. He wanted to know more, but he also knew she might not share everything. As evening approached, the barn grew warmer from the sun that now poured through the open doors. The woman moved closer to the lantern he had lit earlier, watching the light flicker as if fascinated by its simple beauty. John felt a quiet admiration for her. She was cautious but brave, curious but respectful. And despite the strangeness of her presence, he felt a connection he could not explain. The townspeople were unaware of her presence. John did not want them to find out. He did not know how they would react. The woman was different, unusual, possibly extraordinary, and he felt protective. He realized that his feelings were shifting from curiosity to something deeper, though he did not yet understand what it was. He only knew that her presence had changed the rhythm of his day, his thoughts, his life. As night fell, the barn grew quiet again. The woman sat quietly on a hay bale, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the lantern. John finished his chores and sat down near her. They did not speak for a long time. Only listening to the distant sounds of the evening, the soft chirping of crickets, the occasional rustle of an animal, and the wind brushing against the barn walls. Then she spoke again. Do humans always care for strangers like this? Protect them. Her voice was small, hesitant, but full of genuine curiosity. John looked at her, considering how to answer. Not always, but some do. I think it is in us to help when we can, even if it is hard. She nodded slowly, her eyes studying him closely. There was a depth in her gaze that made him feel both exposed and trusted at the same time. For the first time, John realized that this encounter, this unexpected visit during a storm, was not just about shelter. It was about understanding, learning, and connecting across worlds he had never imagined. He could not explain why he felt so drawn to her, but he knew the night and the day had changed him already. He had shared time, work, and conversation with someone extraordinary, someone who would leave a lasting mark on his heart. And as the stars began to appear in the clear night sky, John and the woman sat in the barn together, two beings from different worlds, sharing a quiet understanding. The storm was over, but a new story had begun, one that would test their patience, curiosity, and hearts in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The next morning was quiet, almost peaceful. The storm from the night before had passed completely, leaving a world washed clean and sparkling. Sunlight streamed through the barn's open doors, illuminating the hay and the wooden beams in warm golden light. John moved slowly through the morning chores, still aware of the woman who had stayed with him overnight. She had not left, even though the sun now offered a clear path back to the town. Instead, she stayed quietly in the barn, observing him as he worked. She seemed calm, but there was a tension in her posture that John could not quite understand. Every movement was careful, precise, as if she were learning about the world through the smallest details. Her eyes followed him as he fed the animals, checking fences, and gathered supplies for the day. Occasionally, she would ask a question, simple on the surface, but layered with curiosity and wonder. Why do humans wake early? Do you enjoy your work? John paused and considered her question. Humans wake early because life requires it. Work has to be done, or the world doesn't stay in order. But I do enjoy parts of it being outside, feeling the sun, helping the animals. It is tiring sometimes, but it keeps me alive, keeps me connected to the world. She nodded, listening carefully. There was a small, thoughtful smile on her lips, and John felt a strange warmth at her attention. She seemed to truly care about understanding him. not just what he did. After a while, they sat together on the hay, resting from the morning chores. The woman leaned slightly forward, her eyes fixed on his face. "John, I have seen humans care for each other, yes?" she asked softly. "Family? Friends? They are close. But love, do humans understand love?" Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant, but filled with curiosity. John felt a deep pause in his chest. Her question was simple, yet it touched a part of him he had not considered in a long time. "Love?" he asked, leaning back against the barn wall. "Humans, it is complicated. Some understand it. Some search for it all their lives and never find it. Some think they understand, but only understand a small part of it. Love is trust, connection, care. It is not always easy to explain, and it is not always easy to feel, but it exists in different ways for everyone." She listened closely, tilting her head as if trying to map his words into something she could understand. "Trust, connection, care," she repeated slowly. Her voice was like music, soft and deliberate. "My people, we have bonds like this. We share feelings naturally, without words. Trust is felt, and love. It is understood instantly. Humans, it is different, yes?" John nodded, considering how to answer. "Yes, it is different. Humans use words, gestures, promises, but many of us are afraid to feel completely. We hide parts of ourselves, sometimes without even realizing it. We love, yes, but we also protect ourselves. We are not perfect, but we try." She watched him silently, absorbing his words. There was a deep seriousness in her eyes, an intensity that made him feel as if she were seeing the truth of his life without any judgment. For the first time, she leaned closer, a small gesture that made John's heart skip a beat. "Could humans experience love like my people? Fully? Without fear? Openly?" Her question hung in the barn like the sunlight through the beams, warm yet illuminating things that were hidden. John did not answer immediately. He thought of the people he had known, of the bonds he had tried to form, of the times he had been hurt or disappointed. Could humans truly connect that deeply? Could they love without holding back, as she described? "I think some humans can," he said finally, "but it is rare. Most of us are afraid to show too much, to trust fully. But it is possible. And when it happens, it is beautiful." She smiled softly, the expression gentle and almost shy. "Beautiful."
Yes.
I wanted to know. I wanted to understand how humans experience love, what it feels like, and now I see there is hope. The barn grew warmer in the afternoon sun, and the two of them moved closer to the doorway. She asked about small things, how people express affection, how humans comfort each other, and how they show care without words. John answered patiently, giving examples from his life, a neighbor helping another during sickness, a friend staying awake all night to care for someone in trouble, the quiet moments of holding hands or sharing a meal. She listened intently, her gaze absorbing every detail, her fingers occasionally brushing the hay as if connecting to the world. No. Through touch, as well as sight. Then she asked something more personal. "John, do you have love in your life? Do you care for someone deeply?" His chest tightened at the question. He had lived alone for years, and his heart had grown accustomed to quiet solitude. He had felt loneliness, yes, but he had also felt the comfort of routine, the steady rhythm of life on the farm. Yet her question stirred something inside him, an echo of longing he had buried long ago. "Care for people, yes," he said slowly. "I have loved in my way, but it is not easy for me to share it fully. Sometimes fear stops me. Sometimes I don't know if it is returned. Humans are complicated." She nodded, her expression thoughtful, her eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that surprised him. "I see," she said softly. "Fear, it prevents connection, but choice, it allows connection." He realized she was teaching him something even as he was teaching her. Her people, as she had described, connected naturally, without the walls humans often built around themselves. And yet here she was, asking him questions that made him reflect on his own life. On the way humans loved imperfectly, fearfully, but with courage when they tried. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the barn floor. She moved closer still, sitting beside him, careful not to invade his space, but close enough that he could feel her presence. John, can humans love fully? Can they trust without fear, share without hiding? Her voice was soft, almost a whisper now, as if the barn itself held its breath. John looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He thought of the mistakes he had made, the moments of doubt and hesitation, the chances he had not taken. Some can, he said finally, with quiet conviction. It takes courage, patience, and honesty. It is not easy, but it is worth it. When humans love fully, it can change them, change the world around them. Her eyes shone with a light he could not explain, a mix of understanding and hope. Change. Yes, that is what I wanted to know. That is why I stayed. To see if humans can love truly without fear. She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before returning to him. I see that they can. Sometimes, and perhaps, in time, more will. John felt a strange warmth in his chest, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and something he could not name. Her presence was not frightening now, nor was it strange. It was challenging, but in a way that made him want to be better, to understand more, to connect more. He realized that their conversation had changed him already, opening a door in his heart he had long kept closed. As the evening approached, the barn glowed in the soft light of sunset. The woman stood near the doorway, watching the horizon. John, your world is different from mine, but your hearts, humans, they are capable of great beauty. Her words were sincere, and John felt the weight of them. He realized that she had come seeking understanding, and in doing so, she had brought insight into his life as well. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the quiet sounds of the evening, the gentle breeze, the distant call of a bird, the faint rustle of leaves in the trees. It was a comfortable silence, full of unspoken understanding, full of possibilities. John felt a connection forming, not rushed, not demanding, but steady and undeniable. Finally, she spoke again, softly, almost as if testing her own words. John, can humans love like my people? Fully, openly, without fear? He looked at her, meeting her gaze, and for the first time, he felt certain of his answer. Yes, he said firmly. Some humans can, and maybe we will see more of them if we try. She smiled faintly, the first true smile he had seen since she arrived. It was quiet, but full of meaning. And as the night settled over the barn, John knew that this was not just a conversation, not just a lesson for her. It was a moment that would stay with him forever, a moment that opened his heart in ways he had not expected, a moment that would change both of their lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The next day brought a quiet tension to the barn. The woman had stayed through another night, and John could see in her eyes that something important was on her mind. She moved differently, now less, like an observer, more deliberate, like she carried a weight she could no longer hide. The sunlight poured through the open doors, but inside, a shadow lingered over their time together. John sensed it immediately, though he did not know what it meant. She spoke first, her voice soft but firm. John, there is something you must understand about me, about my people. I cannot stay here forever. Her words made his heart tighten. He had grown used to her presence, to the strange comfort of her attention and curiosity. The thought of her leaving, of returning to a world he could not enter, filled him with unease. Why? He asked carefully. What do you mean you cannot stay? Is it not safe here? She shook her head slowly, her dark hair falling around her shoulders like a curtain. It is safe for a short time, but not long, my people. We must remain hidden. Exposure, it is dangerous. If humans know we exist, it can bring problems. Her eyes searched his, filled with concern and honesty. John realized that her life was more complicated than he had imagined. that her world had rules and dangers he could barely understand. He took a deep breath. "You've trusted me. I promise I won't let anyone harm you. But I need to know, why are you here? Why did you come to my barn during the storm?" She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "The storm. It gave me an opportunity. To observe, to learn, to understand humans, and to understand love." Her words hung in the air. John remembered the questions she had asked about human feelings, about trust and romance. It all connected. Now her curiosity was not just casual. It was deeply personal and perhaps even urgent. She continued, "My people live alongside humans, quietly unseen. We study, we learn, we connect, but rarely intervene. We do not interact openly because it is too risky. Humans, they are unpredictable. Sometimes kind, sometimes dangerous. I wanted to see, to know, how humans love, truly, without hiding." John nodded slowly, understanding the depth of her words. Her life was hidden, full of rules and caution, yet she had chosen to come here, into his world, into his barn, seeking knowledge and experience. He felt a mixture of awe and concern. "And now, what happens if you stay?" She looked down, her fingers brushing the hay nervously. "If I stay, my presence could be noticed. People might talk. Authorities might ask questions. My people would be forced to act, and that could endanger both of us." Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear of him, but with the weight of responsibility she carried. John felt a lump in his throat. He had grown attached to her presence, to her curiosity, to her strange, careful grace. The thought of losing her, not by choice but by circumstance, was painful. "Is there no way for you to stay?" he asked quietly. He could see her hesitate. "There might be a way. If it is temporary, if you help me remain unnoticed for a little longer, maybe I can stay. But it is dangerous, John. You must understand that." His heart pounded in his chest. He did not care about danger, not if it meant helping her. "I will do what I can. I won't let anything happen to you." She looked at him then, her eyes wide and earnest, as if trying to measure the truth in his words. "You care for me?" she asked softly, almost in disbelief. John felt a strange warmth in his chest. "I do," he said simply. "I care that you are safe. I care that you are here. That is all I need." She nodded slowly, processing his words. There was a quiet intensity in that moment, a silent understanding that went beyond words. The afternoon passed with careful routines. John worked, tending the animals and repairing fences, while she stayed close, observing but not interfering. Occasionally, she asked questions about life, about humans, about feelings. But now her questions had a new layer, a sense of urgency, a desire to truly understand before she might have to leave. John realized that she was learning not just from words, but from experience, watching him, noticing small gestures, understanding the quiet moments that revealed human connection. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, she finally spoke about the risks she carried. "John, my people, they are not like humans in many ways. We do not live openly because we must protect ourselves. Exposure, it can bring fear, suspicion, even violence. Humans do not always understand what is different. They might fear us, and then they might try to control us. That is why I cannot stay freely. That is why I came only because of the storm, and only briefly." John nodded, feeling a deep respect for her honesty. He could see that her life was difficult, filled with rules and careful steps. And yet, she had chosen to come to him, to share her time and curiosity. "I understand," he said quietly. "I will protect you while you are here. I promise. But it is hard to think about you leaving." She looked at him, her expression softening. "I know," she said. "It is difficult for me to... I wanted to learn, to feel, and I have. But now, I must decide. I cannot risk myself, and I cannot risk you. My people. They would be forced to act if I am discovered." She paused, then added, almost in a whisper, "And I do not want to cause you harm." John felt the truth of her words settle over him. She was not leaving because she didn't want to stay. She was leaving because she had no choice. The barn, the farm, even the small town, they were temporary shelters for a world she could not fully inhabit. And yet in the short time she had been there, she had taught him more about life, connection, and trust than he had learned in years. He reached out carefully, placing a hand on hers. She did not pull away. "Then let us make these moments count," he said softly. "Even if it is brief, we can share and learn and understand each other. That is enough for now." Her eyes shone with something like relief, or gratitude, or perhaps understanding. "Yes," she said, "that is enough." They spent the rest of the day in quiet observation and conversation. She asked about human relationships, about family and friendship, about the ways people express care without words. John answered patiently, giving examples from his life, and she listened closely, absorbing every detail. There was an intensity in her attention that made each small gesture and word feel important, as if every moment held meaning far beyond the ordinary. As evening fell, John prepared a simple meal for them in the barn. They ate quietly, sharing the food and the silence. Occasionally, she would ask a question or comment on something, but mostly they listened to the wind, to the distant animals, to the rhythm of life around them. The barn felt like a small world of its own, separate from the town, the humans, and the rules that governed their lives. After the meal, she spoke again, her voice soft and serious. "John, I want you to understand. My stay here is a choice I made because I trusted you. But my world is not yours, my people. They have rules, and those rules protect us. They also limit us. If I stay too long, it could bring danger. You must remember that." He nodded, feeling the gravity of her words. He had already felt the weight of her presence in his life. Now he understood that the weight was mutual both for him and for her. "I understand," he said firmly. "I will respect your rules, and I will help you in any way I can. But I want you to know, I care for you. Not just because you are here, but because of who you are. And I will not let anything happen to you while you are with me." She looked at him then, a soft smile forming on her lips. "That is rare, John. Rare for humans. And it is comforting." There was a quiet intimacy in the barn that evening, a sense of understanding that transcended words. Both of them knew the limits, the dangers, and the impermanence of the moment, yet they also knew the value of the connection they had formed. Night fell over the farm, wrapping the barn in darkness and silence. They sat together quietly, listening to the world outside and feeling the closeness of their shared space. John realized that her presence had changed him, not only opening his mind to new possibilities, but also his heart. She had brought with her a world of understanding, trust, and curiosity that he had long forgotten existed. And she, in turn, had found a glimpse of human connection, a lesson in love, trust, and kindness that would stay with her long after she had to leave. Both of them understood that the time together was temporary, but that the impact of their encounter would last far longer. As the night deepened, John felt a quiet resolve. He would protect her, respect her rules, and cherish the moments they shared. And she would learn, observe, and carry forward the understanding of humans of love, care, and trust that she had sought in the barn that stormy night, in that quiet barn. Under the dim glow of the lantern and the fading moonlight, two beings from different worlds shared a fragile, beautiful connection. It was a connection born of trust, curiosity, and respect, a connection that would define their brief time together and leave a lasting imprint on both of their hearts. The morning was calm, with a soft light spreading across the farm. The storm that had brought her to the barn days ago was long gone, leaving behind clear skies and a gentle breeze. Yet the calmness of the morning could not hide the tension between John and the woman. She was quiet, sitting on a bale of hay, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the ground. John could see the thoughtfulness in her eyes, the way she weighed every moment, every choice. He approached slowly, careful not to break the silence she seemed to need. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. His voice was calm, but inside he felt a mixture of dread and understanding. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and sadness. "I am," she said simply. Her voice was steady, yet there was a faint tremor that spoke of the weight she carried. The barn was quiet except for the distant sounds of animals stirring and the faint rustle of leaves outside. John led her to the door, and together they stepped into the bright morning light. The sun warmed their faces, and the fresh air carried the scent of wet earth and growing grass. For a moment, it felt like the world had paused, holding its breath as they prepared to part ways. She looked around the farm, taking in the fields, the barn, the animals. Her gaze lingered on each detail as if trying to store every moment in her memory. "This place. It is different from my home," she said softly. "It is warm, human, alive. Your life, it has beauty I did not expect." John felt a lump in his throat. He had grown used to her presence, and now the thought of her leaving brought a strange ache to his chest. "I'm glad you stayed," he said quietly, "even for a little while. You've changed my days, my thoughts, even my heart." She blinked, a soft smile forming on her lips. "And you have shown me something humans can have, something rare. Trust, care, and love. I will carry this with me." Her words were gentle, but they resonated deeply with him. He realized that their brief time together had left a lasting impression on both of them. She took a deep breath and stepped closer. "I must leave before others notice me," she said. "If I am seen, my people and your world could be in danger. It is not safe for either of us." John nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "I know, but before you go, I want you to know that you are welcome here any time, even if it is only in memory. You've brought something to this place. To me, that will stay." She reached out and touched his hand lightly, a gesture filled with meaning. "I feel it too, John. This connection. It is rare and precious. Even if we are apart, it will remain with us. My people. We feel deeply, but we hide much. You showed me how humans can connect with honesty and courage. I will remember this always." He felt the warmth of her hand, a gentle reminder of everything they had shared. For a moment, words were unnecessary. The silence itself spoke volumes. They walked together toward the edge of the farm, where the path led back to the woods. Her movements were careful, deliberate, as if each step might be observed by someone who should not see her. John wanted to stop her, to ask her to stay, but he knew he could not. The rules she lived by, the risks she carried, he respected them. To try to keep her would be selfish, and he could not risk her safety or his own. Before she disappeared into the trees, she turned back to him. "John, remember, humans can love deeply, truly, and fully. It takes courage, patience, and honesty. Some will fail, some will hide, but some, they will succeed. You have the chance to be one of them." Her eyes held his, searching, as if she wanted to imprint the lesson onto him. John nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I understand," he said softly, "and I will try." She gave a small nod, a gesture of understanding and farewell. Then, with a lightness that reminded him of the first night he had found her in the storm, she stepped into the woods and vanished from sight. The path behind her was empty, and the world seemed suddenly quieter, as if holding its breath for the absence she left. John stood there for a long time, staring into the trees. Feeling the emptiness she had left behind as the day progressed, he returned to his chores, but everything felt different. The barn, the animals, the fields, they were the same, but his perception had changed. He noticed details he had ignored before. The way sunlight caught the dew on the grass, the soft sounds of the animals as they moved, the rhythm of the wind through the trees. Her presence had opened his eyes to the beauty and depth of life he had taken for granted. He remembered her questions, her curiosity, and the way she had observed his world with fresh eyes. He realized that she had taught him more about himself than he had learned in years of solitude. She had shown him how to notice, how to care, how to connect deeply with others. And though she was gone, the lessons remained, etched into his heart. That evening, John sat in the barn, the lantern casting a warm glow across the hay. He thought about the storm, about the night she had arrived, about the conversations they had shared. He felt gratitude, not sadness, because their time together had been meaningful. He realized that love and connection were not just about presence, they were about impact. About the way one life could touch another, even briefly. Days turned into weeks, and life on the farm returned to its usual rhythm. Yet John carried the memory of her with him. Every task, every moment, seemed touched by the quiet wisdom she had shared. He became more attentive to the animals, more patient with neighbors, more open to connection. The brief encounter in the barn had changed him, subtly but profoundly sometimes in the evenings. He would stand at the edge of the farm and look toward the woods, wondering if she was safe, if she had returned to her people, if she remembered him as vividly as he remembered her. The thought brought both sadness and hope. Sadness for her absence, but hope that the bond they had formed could survive even distance and difference. He also noticed small things in himself that had shifted. He smiled more easily. He listened more attentively. He allowed himself to feel without fear. The presence of someone so different had reminded him that humans were capable of profound understanding. That connection could happen in unexpected ways, and that courage was required to truly love. Months later, during another storm, John found himself walking toward the barn. Remembering the night she had arrived, the memory was vivid, the wind, the rain, the moment he had first seen her. He realized that the barn had become more than a shelter. It had become a place of learning, of understanding, and of quiet transformation. He understood now that the storm had brought not just a stranger, but a teacher, a mirror, and a friend. He often thought about her questions, about the way she had asked if humans could love like her people. He realized that the answer was yes, not for everyone, but for some. And perhaps, in time, more humans would learn to love with courage, honesty, and patience, just as she had shown him. Her brief visit had planted a seed in his heart, present, and he knew that it would continue to grow, shaping the way he lived, loved, and understood others. Even though she was gone, the impact of her presence remained. John felt it in quiet moments, the touch of sunlight on the barn floor, the gentle wind through the fields, the soft sounds of the animals he cared for. Every moment reminded him that connection, trust, and love could exist, even across worlds. Even in brief encounters, he smiled softly, thinking of her, knowing that she had carried the lessons of humanity back to her people, and in that thought, he found peace. Their time together had ended, but the understanding, the trust, and the bond they had shared would remain living quietly in their hearts, shaping the way they experienced the world forever. John knew that life would continue. With storms and sunshine, with moments of joy and moments of challenge, but he also knew that the encounter in the barn had changed him irrevocably. It had opened his heart, expanded his mind, and reminded him of the rare and beautiful power of connection between humans, and between beings who might be entirely different, yet capable of understanding each other. As the night fell, he lit the lantern in the barn and looked out at the empty path leading into the woods. He felt a quiet gratitude for the storm that had brought her to him, for the courage that had allowed her to stay, and for the lessons she had shared. Though she was gone, her presence lingered in every corner of the barn, in every shadow and beam. In every thought that crossed his mind, John finally settled on the hay bale, breathing in the calm night air. He felt a deep sense of peace. Life would continue, as it always did. But now it carried the quiet reminder that connection, understanding, and love were possible, even across differences, even in brief encounters. The storm had passed, but its gift remained a gift that would shape him, and perhaps others, for the rest of his life.